Hello everyone. I am Sungmin Im, Professor of Physics Education of Daegu University. It's my honor to be invited to Korean Association of Science Education International Conference and have a talk about this topic. Today I want to talk about making science more inclusive based on my experience of a journey to practice science education for special educational needs students, so-called Science Fair of Hope. Let me talk about basic background for this topic. I guess most science education scholars might agree to science for all as an orientation or aim of science education in modern society. Not to mention of AAAS's position paper 30 years ago, we know where science education is necessary to all people because it is a literacy or citizenship in this society. However, one may argue if it has been really practiced in classrooms so far. Emeritus Professor Sungjae Park, who had firstly founded the Korean Association for Science Education in 1976, asked to Korean scholars like this, are we doing science for all? We might just focus on average group, which result in indifference of a higher group and abandonment of a lower group. Can science educators understand the lower one-third student? What's wrong for this? Is it reasonable, just like on theory practice gap? Or just we need more interest and practice? Otherwise, is there something we lost? So one of the reasons is that the concept of all can be used in vague or confused way in practice of science for all. Sometimes people mistake teaching science to average or normal or general people, or science for majority or public science is similar to science for all. It seems similar but totally different because logically all should include any possible case. So normal should expand to including special and majority to including minority and public to including every citizen. The meaning of science for all should be expanded. Accordingly, the practice of science for all must consider learners' diversity in gender, socioeconomic, ethnic, cultural, linguistic, and disability. And this means that science education should be inclusive. Today, I am focusing on students with disability, and we may call the student with disability as a student with special educational need. So I will call this SEN. But what does it mean to put into practice of science for SEN? Frankly, I'm not a special education expert, but just try to respond to this request. So from now on, I want to share my personal journey about this request. And I will show you the story about Science Fair of Hope in the midst of that journey. Firstly, I will introduce a short history about how we were exploring the practice of science for SEN and came to start a special science fair for SEN students. In 2005, some science educators who share the same interest made a spontaneous research group, so-called Special Science Education Research Group. Emeritus Professor Seung-jae Park and some professors organized the group, and science educators, teachers, and graduate students joined that group. They started to explore some examples and possible practice of science for SEN students. And then in 2006, this group could hold a special KASE conference at Daegu University with sponsorship of Ministry of Education. This special conference had a theme such as searching for the practice of science education, including all students with and without disability. This two-day conference consisted of a series of lectures, a workshop, and a special event, so-called Science Fair with the Blind Student. The workshop was focused on the practice of science education for the blind people. So Professor Toriyama of Tsukuba University introduced an experience of a Japanese Association of Science Education for the Blind, and Korean scholars shared and displayed their exploratory works and models developed by that group. Professor Park Seung-jae had a plenary talk on science for all and special science education. And Professor Toriyama and her colleague gave a wonderful lecture and introduced a live experience how to teach science for the blind people. And Korean scholars of that research group shared and displayed some exploratory works and models that they have developed with students. A special but a most highlighted event of this conference was the fair, so-called Science Fair with the Blind Student. This has planned not as an academic one, but educational practice. So the organizer, including me, planned a science fair for the blind student because special education experts had recommended us that science education for the blind people would be the most probable approach for us. So we invited all students and teachers from one special school for the blind to Daegu University campus for the event. We prepared a science drama for the blind and low vision student. It was much challenging for us because it was the first time to us to show drama to those who cannot see. The fair was like a picnic. After the science drama performance, all participants, including invited students and the organizers and teachers, had lunch together. And then we had experienced various hands-on experiments at science booth. Let me show you the science booth. The hands-on experiment will consist of activity that students can experience without vision using alternative sensory like hearing, the sound, and touching and tasting, etc. And to facilitate student direct experience, we used a new tool like light probe that changes light into sound and utilized models that represent light ray as wire and developed some simple activities that needs somewhat manipulation and inquiry. The conference and the first science fair became a kind of a cornerstone for us to seek science education for SEN students. So a series of R&D was followed and research works were explored. And the research group came to be expanded as a division of KASE since 2011. And the first fair has been developed as an annual event organized by Daegu University, each year focusing on one area of disability. As this special fair became a regular event, we renamed this fair as a Science Fair of Hope, according to Professor Park Seung-jae's suggestion. This is a short history of a Science Fair of Hope since the first fair had been opened in 2006. For last 15 years, we invited or visited all kinds of special schools in Daegu Metropolitan so as to cover all areas of disability. And in certain years, we had invited SEN students from inclusive classroom, not from special school. Now, let me talk about more details of a Science Fair of Hope. The fair is designed as a full-day out-of-school program for SEN students. Every year, the organizer invites over 100 SEN students and teachers from nearby school. At least 50 to 100 pre-service teachers from science major and special education major were involved to prepare and manage this fair. The fair consists of three main programs: science magic show, science drama, and hands-on experiment designed for specific disability area. First, science magic show consists of several fantastic science demonstration, and each demonstration is played like a magic show with a story. In early years, this show had been managed by a veteran science teacher, and later pre-service teachers joined to design and perform the show, and then this has evolved to be performed by pre-service teacher and SEN student together. In the show, pre-service teachers wearing magician costume like Harry Potter invited audience students to the stage and performed the magic with them together. Sometimes students perform the show by themselves. For this, they should exercise the show with the help of pre-service teachers for a month. Let's watch a clip of the show performed by student and pre-service teacher together.
여러분 잘 아는 박수 한번 주세요. 여러분 박수 주셔서 감사합니다. 여러분 이제 저희가 한번
The second program is a science drama to introduce a scientific
set with interesting story and music that students like. All science drama is produced and performed by pre-service teachers every year. Each year, science drama focuses on the target student and specific concept like this. And this is the list of science drama title in Science Fair of Hope. Sometimes pre-service teachers create original scenario in consideration students' understandability and science concept. And in many cases, the story was an adventure story mixed with science concept. Let me introduce an example of a 2016 drama titled Princess Sound and Prince Medium. Princess Sound lost her sound because Devil King had kidnapped the Princess Medium. So she had an adventure journey to save Prince's medium and finally got him back with the help of scientific knowledge. And they got married and lived happy. The end. Kids like such a romance and adventure story. Most of all, students like songs and dance in the science drama. K-pop and dance could drama exciting so that student fell into drama. Sometimes a student even jumped into the stage. Let me show you. In any case, science drama try to consider student disability. For example, subtitles and sign languages were used for the hearing impaired student. After science magic show and drama performance, participants have lunch together, and then students experience a third program, hands-on experiment at the booth in outdoor field. In each fair, 10 to 15 science experiment activities were managed by pre-service teachers, and sometimes SEN students manage their own booth by themselves with the help of pre-service teachers. At designing hands-on experiment for SEN, research works could be applied into practice. Simple, easy words and printed letters and sign and body languages would be used to introduce students to participate in the activity. Important criteria for this activity is to make a student engage the activity by oneself. For this, we make the experiment simple and interesting as possible. Another important aspect of that it is an educational program so that each activity has explicit relationship with school science curriculum. But I must confess the last year's situation. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic changed so many things. As all kinds of person-to-person meeting are forbidden, most events and programs for SEN students and support were cancelled. And Science Fair of Hope also had a great challenge. I do not have enough time to talk about this issue in detail, but briefly I will introduce how we managed this fair last year, for it was extraordinary case. Last year's fair was implemented as an online event, which based on live remote interaction between university and invited classrooms. The fair consists of two programs. The first one is a science web drama instead of a magic show and drama performance. And the second one is online science experiment class using Zoom and Science Box. We used YouTube live streaming for this. Pre-service teachers changed the laboratory into a broadcasting room. Invited students could join science experiment through Zoom and Science Box that we sent before the fair. Actually, I have so many stories about this, but I'm afraid it's about time to turn over to the last section of this talk. I will wrap up my talk with sharing lessons that I learned from last experience of Science Fair of Hope. The first lesson is about how to teach science for SEN students. I came to induce three important criteria for science education with SEN students. The first, include every learner in science learning. Other words, do not exclude any SEN student due to their disabilities. In my lived experience, disability could not be a barrier for learning science. Rather, most apparent and practical barrier is people's low expectation on their ability to do science. Therefore, the first and the most simple way to teach science for SEN is to just to do science for them, including every learner. And second, provide the science inquiry content and activity that is universal for all people. There is no special knowledge or inquiry separated only for SEN. They only need appropriate adaptation or modification considering learners' disability, and this is for all students, not just for SEN students. And third, facilitate to experience or participate science for oneself. Teachers can help them experience by oneself, but cannot do instead of the student. Teachers cannot take students' experience in the name of help. Most obstacle for SEN students to do science is the absence of experience, not the absence of ability. I can say the most important role of science fair of hope is to provide the SEN student with the chance of this activity, this experience. The other lesson is about pre-service teacher education. How to equip pre-service teachers for the future is a critical task for all teacher educators. I dare to say that the future we should prepare is the inclusive society. Therefore, teacher educators should prepare equipping pre-service teachers for coming inclusive society. Also, Science Fair of Hope is a limited example. It would serve as a teacher education program, so I can infer its significance as a teacher education program. First, it provides pre-service teachers with live teaching experience for SEN. You may know that teachers may teach as they are taught. So pre-service teachers' teaching experience would affect much on their prospective teaching. And also, this teaching experience cannot only exercise teaching, but also voluntary teaching that may affect their future teacher's life. And second, from this pre-service teacher can learn to develop or adapt teaching materials for their students. Pre-service teachers in the Science Fair of Hope came to involve creating and preparing drama, demonstration, hands-on experiment for SEN, and these are always challenging for them to need much effort and energy. They might learn the teaching. If it is only for one student, it's a hard job that needs much energy to prepare and implement. But isn't it reasonable? And third, some research works could conclude that this kind of a program can cultivate pre-service teachers' effective resources for inclusive education. The participant pre-service teachers in Science Fair of Hope showed positive change in their awareness for inclusive classroom and also social distance against disability. Fourth, by engaging this program, pre-service teachers can experience teaching as collaborative work. Science Fair of Hope is only possible with diverse kind of collaboration and it integrates the people from different discipline and diverse talent. And I believe that pre-service teachers can learn. Teaching and learning can only be possible at the elbows of others. In 2018 summer, as I visit Washington, D.C. to attend American Association for Science Physics Teacher annual conference, I dropped to visit Holocaust Memorial Museum. And this scene was much impressive for me. These are shoes of victims of that Holocaust. How such a terrible tragedy could be happened by human, I cannot understand till now. My question was developed to who were the victim. At first, they were the disabled and gypsy. Why them? One may have impairment. Surely every human has own impairment. But how we regard people's impairment may lead totally different and like this. You may wonder why I show you this. The reason to suddenly show you this episode is to suggest the last lesson. Who is the student we teach? I came to learn last lesson from last experience. How to care for people who I teach is the most critical one in teaching science beyond how to teach them. Often we, no, maybe I, would like to focus on only subject matter or how to teach itself, and often lost the important question, who is the student I teach? When I had to prepare a science fair for the blind student and to teach physics of light to those who cannot see the light, soon I came to learn that my knowledge about physics was useless at that time. I must have explored suddenly, seriously, who the students that I teach is and how they could participate and understand my teaching. The key point is that we should care for and consider of every single student whom we teach. In general, a specially designed program for a single student can be applied to other students. Therefore, our effort to make science inclusive for one single student can make science for all in practice. This is the final page of what I want to share with you. The story that I talked today is just one case for this, but I hope other research and practice would be followed to make science more inclusive. Thank you for joining this talk. I really welcome any comments and questions and advices. You can touch with me by email. Thank you again.